This is the best first card trick for you to learn. It's extremely powerful and extremely easy. You'll be able to understand the basic principle and do it for a friend in less than 5 minutes. And you can even use this trick to get great reactions all the way up until you're a professional magician. It's called the Poker Player's Picnic, and I learned it from the Royal Road to Card Magic. We're going to start by going through the basic form of how this trick works, which requires 0 sleight of hand, and then go through the subtleties and a few ideas about how we can make this a truly special piece of magic. Let's get into it. All you need is a deck of cards and a table. You're going to take the 4 aces out and leave them on top of the deck. You're going to give the cards to the spectator and get them to cut half the deck down to the table on their left. Then place the rest of the cards next to it there. I then generally get them to cut this packet in half and then cut the first packet in half all the way to the end like that. Then you get into the procedure of the trick, where you get them to take this first packet, take 3 cards from the top and place it on the bottom, and then deal a card onto the top of all the other packets. Repeat this process for the remaining packets. And then for this final packet, which if you've been following along correctly, has the aces in it, you're going to take the 3 cards from the top, which are indifferent cards that were dealt from the other packets, place them on the bottom, and then deal a card on top of each pile. Then after a bit of time and presenting to them, you can show that each ace has found its way to the top of each packet. That is the most basic form of the trick. There are a few small details that are going to take this from a regular kind of easy procedural trick to feeling like an actual miracle. Before handing the deck off to the spectator, it can be extremely helpful to do a false shuffle that retains the top stock, like the overhand shuffle. I teach a basic form of the overhand shuffle in one of my other videos. I'll put a link in the description below. And I'll quickly go through how to do this shuffle while actually retaining the top stock. Once you have your grip, you're going to pick up roughly 2/3 of the deck like normal, peel off 1 card ever so slightly lower than the rest of them, and contact this card with your pinky. Then shuffle off the rest of the deck while still retaining this little pinky break. Then after a second or two, maybe you say something or do a natural hand gesture, you're going to pick up everything underneath the in-jogged card and throw it on top. Remember, this was and now is again the top of the deck. A really good tip for this false shuffle is to look at the cards while you do the first shuffle and then look up at the spectator just before you throw the cards back on top. This creates a moment of misdirection and gets them to look up at your eyes when you do the sneaky part of this move. You're hoping that in their memory, they saw you intensely shuffling the cards one time and then they kind of forget about the last part. After that, when you hand the deck off to the spectator, you don't want to be nervous about them handling the deck. Okay, you want to hand it off to them without a care in the world and immediately give them an instruction. The more relaxed you are with this, the less likely they are to do something weird with the cards and shuffle them before they cut down to the table. I'll usually say, simply go ahead and take these cards and gesture, just cut the top half down to the table and point on the table to where I want them to cut it. It'd be smart to get them to cut the first packet to their left or your right, because we read left to right and you want them to start with that packet when the procedure begins. You're obviously going to tell them to, but you just want it to be a natural thing. There is also a specific reason why I get them to do it in this weird order, where they cut half and half, and the middle packet in half, and then the top packet in half over there again. You want them to subtly lose where the top part of the deck is. If you simply get them to place the cards down and then cut 4 packets, it's pretty easy to know where the top packet is. So to recap, I get them to cut half the deck down to the table there and then place the remaining half next to it. I then get them to cut the middle packet in half and then cut the first packet in half all the way to the end. You don't want to leave it up to them to figure this out as well. You can be relatively direct with your instructions and point exactly to where you want them to cut the packets. You can be just as direct throughout the coming procedure, where you get them to pick up the first packet, and I usually call it the first packet because that conditions them to go through the packets in order, and tell them to put the 3 cards on the bottom and then deal a card on top of all the rest of them. And you can point to all the packets as they go. Some spectators can begin to make errors when they go through this process, like you have spectators come along and maybe they start by dealing a card on top of the rest of them. and then placing 3 cards to the bottom. You don't want to correct them too harshly if they muck it up. Obviously, they have 3 attempts to learn the sequence before they get to this final one, but you do want to directly inform them of the correct way to do it. And so if they muck it up on, say, the second one, on the third one, you make sure they do it correctly, and then on the last one, you give it the exact same treatment. Now, we get to the end of the trick, and here is where we want to make use of a principle called time misdirection. You want to create some space between this procedure that they've done and the reveal. So hopefully they forget as much of the procedure as possible. You generally need to lean into whatever presentation you've decided on for a little bit of time and really have something to talk about. On top of using your presentation and whatever story you're telling them, you're also going to reinforce at the very end just how random all of this was. You can say you randomly cut the cards into these 4 piles. You can even slightly change the wording that you used. You can say, oh, well, at the very beginning, you randomly mixed the cards into these 4 piles. And then you mix them even further by dealing some cards out and moving the packets around. You don't really want to remind them of the procedure in specific terms. The procedure is supposed to be a randomization. And with the right wording and the right presentation, they can completely forget how structured all of it was. You'll notice that they'll retell the story to their friends and the people around them in a completely different way. They'll say, I mixed up these 4 packets, he didn't even touch the cards, and then all the 4 aces were on top. Rather than going through it step by step and saying, I cut half the packet down to the table, and then I put the rest down, and then they'll ignore that if you do this correctly. Then, after creating this time misdirection, and also reinforcing how random everything was, you get to show them the reveal, and generally, they will react in a big way. Now, let's break down some of the presentational elements of this trick. It's important to come up with a justification for any procedure that's going on in the trick. You want this justification to be nuanced in the way that it makes it normal that it's going on while it's happening, but doesn't draw lots of attention to it. I usually go into a bit of detail about tarot cards and about how they're used and how they work, and how you introduce some randomness by giving the cards a bit of a shuffle, and then you go through a certain ritual that is the same every time, and it's a way of sort of tying your soul to the cards, or something of that nature. And then we can talk about how the randomness part is you cutting to different parts of the deck and cutting them all out, and how if literally one card had been different from the start, then the entire sequence would have changed. And then our ritual is putting the 3 cards from the top of the deck to the bottom and dealing a card onto the other piles. This gives us a reason for doing each stage of this trick. Then, at the end, we can jump back into our presentation and maybe we talk a little bit more about tarot cards or anything else that we find interesting that matches up with what we've been talking about so far. And then we recap what we've done so far in the way that I talked about earlier that makes it seem more and more impressive when we reveal our aces. One really stupid thing that you shouldn't do is lead into this trick by saying, we're gonna find the aces, or something to that effect, and giving away the end. Not only does it make it not a surprise at the end when they've found all the aces, but also it makes it easier for them to screw you up and figure out how the trick is done. It's something that I've talked about a bit already, but it makes it really hard for them to put the pieces together at the end of the trick and figure out how it was done. Because going along, they didn't really know what was important. They didn't know what part of the procedure they should really pay attention to. All they can really focus on is just keeping up and following along with your story. So definitely don't give away the ending of this trick. Now, going a step deeper into what this trick really is, it's really just an elaborate 4-card force. You can actually force any series of cards that you like. Say you know that your spectator was born in 1984. You could possibly force the year. Or if you happen to know their PIN code to their phone or something, you could possibly force that too. Any kind of significant number that's 4 digits long can be used for this trick. There's a really awesome spin on this trick by a guy called John Wilson, and you can find it on Vanishing Ink. Let's get a conversation going in the comments so that we can all learn from each other and find the best ways to present this trick. If you've watched all the way through this video, thank you so much. This is the first longer video that I've put out. I was a wee bit nervous and I wasn't sure how it was really going to go. To kind of recap what we've been through, this was the Poker Player's Picnic. You can find it in the Raw Road to Card Magic. It's in the first chapter, I believe. A few really important things to remember as you do this trick for other people. Don't be nervous about handing them the deck of cards. Give them an instruction right away so that they don't differ from what you want them to do. And if you're relaxed, they'll be relaxed. So just chill out. We've gone through a few really important concepts in Magic as well that you're going to master as you master this trick. Firstly, time misdirection, creating some distance in time between when you finish the procedure that facilitates the trick and the actual reveal at the end that's going to make everyone go crazy, which should, in theory, get them to forget as much of the procedure as possible, which is great for you. And secondly, coming up with a nuanced approach to your presentation so that the procedure isn't focused on and really highlighted, but also makes sense and it's justified. Again, working to help them forget the procedure and make it a real non-event in your trick. I really hope that you do enjoy performing this trick because I genuinely think that it is the best trick for any beginner to learn. I still get use out of it to this day. I've been doing magic for about 10 years. I even showed my fiance, John Wilson's version, and she's seen all of my magic. The reaction that she gave was up there with the best magic that I've ever done for her. That's probably everything that I've got to say on this trick, and it's just started to rain, so it's going to stitch up the background noise for this video. So I'm going to wrap it up there. Thanks for watching again. Really appreciate it. Catch you in the next one. See ya.